So remember at the G7 press conference where he said we got 4 weeks? He wasn't bullshitting. That's really what he's being told.
Hello everyone, this is calling with you, and we have I'm Yelena. I'm joined by Ryan and our favorite guest Larry, because I really love that picture with with a flower, and on each petal there was a situation with the Strait of Hormuz: open, closed, open, closed, open, closed.
Sort of like that. She loves me not. She loves
Yeah.
me. She loves me not. Yeah. Well, yeah, it is. It's a term that's being used politically primarily in the United States. So Donald Trump, it's open. Okay, what does that mean? Does that mean that ships are just so they're lining up saying, "Baby, let's go"? We can't wait to get through. No, because you have the numbers I've seen are between 9% and 12% of the world's cargo fleet. The ships that hold cargo or oil and gas, that kind of thing, have been sitting idle in the Strait of Hormuz now for 4 months, more than 4 months. And yeah, God, you can't believe this. This whole thing began the end of February. So you got March, April, May, and now we're coming to the end of June. So those ships, even if the Strait of Hormuz is open, they don't just say, "Hey boys, fire up your engines, full speed ahead, let's go." No, the ships have actually the water's very salty. They got barnacles attached to it. The ship systems are going to have to be checked. So there's a whole, let's call it, maintenance cycle that they're going to have to, that most of those ships are going to have to go through before they can actually, if they get underway, they're certainly not going to be hauling cargo, vast majority of them. So that's one thing. Second thing, though, yeah,
it takes a while to get those things all running again. Is the point?
Second issue is the insurance. So most of the ships that are not Iranian flagged or not some part of a ghost fleet, they get insured by Lloyd's of London, and Lloyd's has said, "You're not going anywhere until we get a firm certification that there are no mines out there in the waters." And the Department of Defense or Department of War, Pentagon, told the U.S. Congress, 2 months ago, they said, "Look, it's going to take us up to 6 months to clear the mines." So that right there is going to hinder any movement of ships. And then there's the other issue of what kind of infrastructure damage was done to the oil and LNG terminals. Are they actually operating? Did they have to close down? If you had to shut down a mine or an oil well, it's not like turning on the spigot of a hose. Twist it on, twist it off. Water comes out of me. No, it may take some time to get it running again. So, is the Strait of Hormuz open? Yeah. Iran can sell its ships in and out right now without problem. They're not getting shot at by the United States. They don't have to worry about U.S. attempting to board. And the U.S. made a big deal about its previous blockade. And again, the problem there was there were a limited number of U.S. ships. So, they could stop 1 or 2 Iranian ships, but they couldn't stop them all. But for right now, if the mines weren't there, and if the oil terminals and LNG terminals are great, and if those ships had finished their maintenance cycle, yeah, things would be going great. But they aren't. That's the point. They aren't. And that you got to step back and say, why is Donald Trump making such a big deal about this now? Huh? Because before it was Strait of Hormuz, Schmormuz, I don't care. We don't need it. It's not important to us. So he said. Well, turns out it's pretty damn important. because of the supply of heavy crude that comes out of the Persian Gulf. That essentially 20% of there's a shortage, a global shortage now because of that shutdown over the last 4 months. And I've been the war is war is great. I'm going to extend Ambrose Bierce's the quotation allegedly attributed to Ambrose Bierce, which was, "War is God's way of teaching Americans geography." Well,
Right.
so now it's also teaching us other things. I've learned a hell of a lot about oil. I used to think oil, what, heavy, light, does it matter? Oh, it absolutely matters. Um, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, does it matter how much is in there? Yeah, it matters. So you're finding out that the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, if it falls below a certain level, the structural integrity of these salt caverns where the oil is stored, is in jeopardy. And again, I used to think of it as like the big cavern, and you just fill it up like you'd fill up a bucket. No, these storage sites, there are four main storage sites, physical sites, but at each one of those sites, they've got multiple holes that are in the ground from previous salt mining. So when they dig into the ground, take out salt, uh, and so they now fill each of those little holes. And to get the oil out, what they have to do is they pump water into it. Now, the reason I learned, the reason they store oil in the salt is because oil and salt that doesn't make salty oil. The oil doesn't dissolve into the salt. Whereas you pump water in there, fresh water, you get salt water. And so the water can erode it. So the point of all this is you got a minimum level. So then when you hear the Department of Energy come out and say, yeah, we got 340 million barrels left. Sounds like a lot until you realize that that 340 million barrels, you got to subtract 140 million as the minimum that has to stay in there. And then, so that takes you down to 200 million barrels. And then within that 200 million barrels, let's say 120 million is light crude, 80 million is the heavy crude. This is where the problem comes. The heavy crude produces jet fuel and diesel. And so if you get a barrel of oil, you don't say, oh, okay, we're going to produce half of this is going to be jet fuel and half is going to, no, when the refining's going on, you got to do one or the other. You got to make a choice. And so what has compounded sort of the normal use, there's not a war going on in the Middle East. You're not flying combat missions that have to be constantly refueled. And so the demand, this war increased the demand for this diesel fuel. So at the very time that we're getting the cut off of the supply, the demand goes way up. And because you still got the civil aviation, it needs the fuel, and you still got all those trucks that take that haul food to the grocery store and products to Walmart and wherever. So all of a sudden, there is a tremendous shortage, and this shortage is going to lead to dramatic increases in price. That's a long way of explaining why Donald Trump freaked the hell out 2 weeks ago, when I guess he'd reportedly been told this all along, but just ignored it. But it finally, someone smacked him upside the head and said, "Listen, we're not kidding. This is serious." And so remember at the G7 press conference where he said we got 4 weeks. He wasn't bullshitting. That's really what he's being told. So I'm looking it's going to be interesting the next couple of weeks, see what happens.
I think the operative phrase from the old days now is "it's still the economy, stupid."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no,
And
absolutely. So this is, but like I said, let's look on the bright side of all this. I keep learning a lot from it. And so as I'm learning, I'm passing on what I learn. And so we make everybody smarter about the overall situation. But it doesn't necessarily, the war Yeah, maybe there's another silver lining here. Uh, if the United States wanted to reignite the war and start and up the attacks on Israel, there's going to be actual some physical consequences to our oil supply, fuel supply. That means the Americans will suffer at home uh, because of the lack of diesel, or they'll have to make a choice to stop going to war.
You also made a point when we spoke with you last week that we're also selling our strategic oil reserve to Europe.
Yeah,
So-
the
but
light.
China's not.
Yeah, the light crude that's used to make gasoline, that's been sold to Europe, is my understanding. And yeah, and China isn't.
Well, it's also a way for oil companies and for oil refineries to make some profits finally, because before that we experienced quite a low price for oil that, of course, oil miners don't like because they need to invest a lot in investigation of new oil fields. And it also, oil isn't becoming cheaper because cheap oil is in the Middle East, it's lightly extracted. But in the Northern Sea or on Norwegian coast, there is such a, how to say, uh, I don't know how to call it in English, but in general, there is a baseline for the oil price. And in
Yeah,
Northern Sea, it's $47 per barrel. So this is the minimum price that the oil must have in order to make extraction possible as such, because of salaries and because of everything else. And if oil drops that low, and Trump, I think he said today or yesterday that we will be having low oil prices. I don't think that oil mining companies that are not limited to one state, they are how to say transnational, and same Total or I don't know, or Chevron, they might be operating everywhere in the
yeah,
world. Of course, they are not fond of perspective to have low oil prices now, when at least they have some opportunity to gain additional profit. And what also is interesting, a couple of weeks ago, taking a look at Saudi Aramco website where they hire personnel, they have enormous amount of open job offers. I think they will also encounter workforce deficit because people left the area. On the one hand, they attracted low paid workers from Southeastern Asia because people have nowhere to go, so they do all the dirty jobs. On the other hand, there are, so to speak, white collar jobs and engineering jobs that they hire from Europe and from the US, because uh, Saudis themselves, they're not very technical people, mildly saying. So they are forced to hire staff. And of course, some nice positions are held by locals, but it's mostly for, as a decoration. And the real job is done by the outside workers. So this is another factor in restoration of oil traffic as such, as
right.
I see it at least. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, and of course, you do have some of these psychotic back and forth with Lindsey Graham doing his whole song and dance, and Trump's going to take over. He's got his whole thing. Oh, Trump's going to take over Iran or the Strait and charge a fee, contrary to what J.D. Vance was saying, where he's telling Israel that you're the most hated country on earth. We're the only one. So pipe down. So, I mean, I don't want to get into so much that drama, except to say that it's clear the policy of the United States is not firmly in one camp or the other. It's like chaos in the policymaking in the United States.
Yeah, well, there's no strategic vision here. And, we continue to believe that we can get our way by force, coercion, threats. And being divorced from reality has become sort of a common theme. So look at Lindsey Graham said, "Oh, you do this or else we're going to take over the Strait of Hormuz." Well, we just had 4 friggin' months to try to do that and failed to do that. Well, why, if we could do that, why didn't we do it? And the reason is we can't do it. We don't have the military power to do it. Or let me rephrase that. we're not willing to take the kind of losses that would be required
Right.
to get control of the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, it would be very, very costly in terms of of ships, planes, personnel. Now, could we ultimately apply enough military force that we could break the back of Iran? Yeah, probably. But again, you got to step back and say at what cost. And it's like saying, hey, I make $50,000 a year. I'd like to buy a new car. I think I want a Lamborghini. Okay, well, that Lamborghini is going to cost 5 years of if you take all the money that you're going to make for the next 5 years, that might cover it. Of course, you won't eat. You won't have any clothes. You won't have a place to live. So you have to step back and say, okay, what can I afford? Oh, a Hyundai. Okay, I got to go with a cheap Hyundai. And so that's part of this calculation that has taken place with respect to the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian multi-layered defense made it so costly for anyone to try to quote open it and take control of it, because they're in a good defensive position and they have lots of different weapon systems that they can apply. So this is um, it's just it's a kind of I call it locker room talk. Oh yeah, we could do X, Y, and Z, but the reality is they can't. And so at some point you got to stop making threats that you can't fulfill.
Well, it's about illusion. And speaking of the illusions, and some of those illusions, by the way, they're not for the broader audience. They're for yourself. We got to believe this ourselves. So we're going to keep telling this fairy tale so that we can be sure that we're doing the right thing. But speaking of illusions, there's actually two that I wanted to get your thinking on. One illusion is that all of the Ukrainian drone strikes, whether it's on oil facilities on the outskirts of Moscow, or some of these that more spectacular explosions and things like that over the last couple of days. I mean, by the way, they say these were electronic plants. I thought those were washing machine plants. Anyway, so the illusion is, Ukraine is coming back.
Yeah.
So that's one illusion I want to get your thinking on. And the other illusion is Keir Starmer is getting kicked to the curb. And this is an illusion that there is some democracy in Europe.
Where do you want me to start? Let's start with Keir Starmer.
The comic one.
This is really pathetic. The guy is so desperate to stay, because he quote announced he's going to resign eventually because he's going to wait until they have the internal elections. So the Labor Party elects a new leader, and then he'll step aside. Well, that may be a month or more. He could conceivably stay there in as quote prime minister until the end of August. He's ignoring the fact that nobody wants him there. Nobody respects him. But God, he loves the power. He loves whatever access it gives him. So yeah, it's just it's sad, but it's sort of a good metaphor for the kind of disaster that modern politics has become, both in Europe and here, even here in the United States. A leadership that's out of touch with reality. The poll was done. I saw this chart. I posted the chart at Sonar 21. This war was unpopular. This was the most unpopular war the United States has ever fought at the outset. At the outset, like World War II, even Vietnam had, 45, 50% support at the outset. This had like negative 13%. So it wasn't even supported at the outset. And and the lack of support has increased as time has gone on. So we've got that, being out of touch with reality. What was the first part?
Ukraine.
Oh yeah, Ukraine.
Drone attacks supposedly mean that Ukraine's back and Russia's on its heels.
Yeah, this is just a desperate attempt by Ukraine to keep the Europeans engaged and trying to get the United States re-engaged, and the U.S. is to some extent. The problem they got is what's actually happening on the ground. If you would have gone back 3 months, most analysts would have said, well, it's unlikely that the Russians will be able to regain full control of Donetsk by the end of the year. It might spill over into next year. Now they're saying it's going to be end of August. It looks like very much, and perhaps sooner. The front has been crumbling. Ukrainian troops are doing quicker retreats out of sights. So the Russians, the last two key cities, defensive belts in Donetsk, it's in the western part of Donetsk, are called Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. And there was a third city that was part of that, that was seen like as a wall, a defensive wall, Konstantinovka. Well, Russia has captured that. They've retaken that. And then when you look at the map, they're starting to envelop and encircle the Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. So, Ukraine has no answer to this. It's not like they've got a reserve army of 200,000 men trained that they can say, okay, we can now employ them. That they've got the logistics to sustain them. They don't. What they have is the Brits and the United States supplying drones and supplying some intelligence information used to send those drones to targets. The Russians are shooting down most of them, but some get through. And when they get through, what I find fascinating is you hear about, they'll brag about these sites they hit, but they're largely civilian sites, and they're killing civilians. But with all of the bombing the Russians are doing, you're not hearing reports of massive civilian losses on the Ukrainian side. And it's not just, I'm just talking about news reports. I mean, it's a simple thing of names. Put the names out there. It's the same, I use the same standard I applied to the false claims that in the aftermath of October 7th that, Hamas killed 40 babies. Okay, what are their names? Because every grandparent who's got a picture of their new grandbaby, if that baby was killed, by God, those grandparents would be out, grieving about it in public and showing the picture. And that never happened because it was a bullshit story. Well, this goes back to claims that the Russians have caused civilian casualties on the Ukrainian side. Okay, show us the pictures. Show us the names. They don't exist. So Russia has intensified its military activity. But I'll concede that when it comes to information operations, when it comes to telling their story, if you will, marketing, Russia sucks. I mean, they suck big time. They're awful at it. They don't. I've been pressing. I know folks at like TASS as an example, and we tell them, guys, put out a goddamn map that's time elapsed that shows here's where we were in September 2023, 2024, 2025. You can visibly show the progress that's been made. Do they do that? No, we're too busy doing other stuff. It frustrates the hell out of me that they have a story to tell. They don't do it. I keep encouraging them. Hire those kids from Iran that do the Lego videos. They know what they're doing. They know how to get a story out and win. Because part of this is winning public opinion, or at least getting public opinion shaped in the right way so that they know what it's actually based on. there are two types of propaganda. Propaganda, which is based entirely on a lie to get you to believe a lie, or actually propaganda that's based on truth, so you know what the truth is. So propaganda propaganda is not necessarily a negative. You're trying to get information out so people understand how to look at the world. So the Ukraine, from the standpoint of these drone attacks, has had success as a propaganda. It makes it look like Russia's weak. It makes it look like Russia's vulnerable, and all Russia's suffering terrible losses. Now the fact is they're not, but that's not the perception that's being captured here in the West.
And
Now,
actually,
but
about Ukraine, Ren, sorry,
yeah, go
about
ahead.
Ukraine and the drone attacks, I was talking to my people I know from Russia, and they're saying that actually Ukrainian drones, they first of all launched them randomly, and secondly, these drones are filled up with liquid that ignites when the drone is being
Right.
shot. So it creates a massive blast picture, and everyone is like, "Wow, you see, everything's burning, and there is terrible clouds of smoke." And this is why Ukraine is winning. And secondly, what I have to say about Russian media, I have asked this question our Russian-speaking guest, Vladimir Trukhan. I guess we will have to invite him also to English-speaking show because I think it would be very interesting. And I asked him specifically what's going on with Russian media. Why are they like that? And he explained that Russian media, unfortunately, is still West-trained. So people who are trying to bring something to even Russian own audience, it all relies on bloggers, and these bloggers are mostly volunteers because anything else you just cannot rely on that.
Right.
And
Right.
media they are mostly trained. Yeah, this will bring us money. This will not bring us money. Oh yeah, let's stick to what brings us money. That's why there were even jokes made that Elon Musk's when he visited Moscow, every move of him was documented. That he went here and he went there and he ate this. And Russians were like, "What a cringe! Why are they speaking so much about Elon Musk that when there are other stuff to talk about?" So yeah, Russian media,
Yeah.
unfortunately, they need to go back from Western trained patterns and switch to something normal.
Yeah. In
Finally.
fact, I was with Errol on his first trip, and so I got to spend quite a bit of time with him and his partner. Uh, yeah, and Errol. I remember he was very impressed with Russia, so he's been back several times now. I know that he went back for Spieth. He's in. I think he's actually converted to the Orthodox faith. So yeah, he's really he's really been captured by Russia. It's very funny.
That's it. That's to what Yelena's saying and to what you're saying, Larry. I mean, there are definitely lots of attacks, but it's completely supported by the British. It is completely supported by the United States. It is completely supported by Germany, France. So, I see regularly the British press and this thing, the way that these guys are going is they're going for a much bigger conflict. And I think that they will
Yes.
get it at some point if they keep pushing it. So I agree. Ukraine itself is losing, but you know, the structures of the EU and NATO. I mean, I forget what his name is over there at the EU. They're saying the EU is with Ukraine. So, I mean, they're actively pursuing what I think will become eventually a bigger war. Do you think?
Well, yeah,
that's
yeah.
true?
No, I think it's just a matter of time before Russia decides to take out a drone factory or missile factory in and around London or Manchester or wherever that factory is located, and that's going to precipitate a crisis. Now, I think the Russians also, but in light of Keir Starmer's political problems, may wait, wanting to see who the next prime minister is if uh, he will be less crazy. Because Starmer's he's obsessed with Ukraine and has really made it such a, he's focused on that as a priority for his administration instead of taking care about improving the lives of the Brits. That's what's sort of, so bizarre about this.
And that's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
support
Now
of the war
that's right.
in Europe. It was pretty interesting. You know, I pay attention to graffiti that are on the walls and everywhere. And what I can only see is free Palestine, and from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. This is what I see, for example, here in Central Europe. I don't see any support for Ukraine or something like that.
Yeah.
Not a single Ukrainian flag, even. Okay, on campuses, you know, where this type of people inhabits that support the trend type, but they are minority. If you take a look at what like common people are thinking, it's mostly Palestine.
But that was, again, that was in the early days of the war back in 2022. Yeah, everybody, a lot of people in the West were wearing flags and support Ukraine signs in their yard. Again, not having any knowledge whatsoever about what the hell they were supporting. And so you go up to them and say, "Oh, so you're in favor of the Nazis?" "Oh, I am not." Well, that's what these guys are. I mean, these guys, finally, you know, you've seen this dust up of late between Poland and Ukraine, where they'd given some awards to the Ukrainians, and then they're jerking them back because of Zelensky, their glorification of these, you know, folks that murdered more than 100,000 Poles.
Well,
And
all right.
unfortunately,
So
Poland
go
is
ahead.
not also. I'm sorry. Poland is also not very, how to say, intended to speak about Volyn massacre that took place. They are mostly silent about that, and they started to rem, uh, remember about this only now,
Yeah.
when the money is running out and when they see the Ukraine is losing. So I think it is an attempt to dump Ukraine finally and to get rid of the support that actually drains money resources from Poland in vain. If they saw, if they really seemed somehow of return on investments, I think they would be acting otherwise. Ryan, I'm sorry I
No, no, no,
interrupted
no.
you.
It's fine. It's fine. You're saying very interesting things. This is fascinating discussion here. So Poland. So I want to ask you, and I don't know, Larry, if you know anything about this at all. I don't even know if you do, Yelena. I didn't know about this, but I was reading through Elon Musk's feed, and this is going back to just Europe in general. And he, among others, is posting on the what they're calling the rape gangs
Uh-huh.
in Europe, and so you guys both know that's good. This is so he's going after this, and Alex Craner said that he thinks, as an oligarch, you know, Elon's an oligarch, that there is a move by some factions within the U.S. To want to go back to being a republic, and so there's this big attack on the establishment in Europe, which is just allowing this to happen to their population. Can you say anything about that? Because it's really mind blowing to me.
Well, okay, so yeah, what this goes back to that when Keir Starmer was a prosecutor and, you know, working at this local level, you had these gangs. I think they're largely Pakistani, but they came out of Islamic communities, and I emphasize that uh, this is not trying to smear Islam as a rape culture, but in this particular instance, with these guys would target teenage girls basically and rape them, and they'd be raped multiple times, and instead of, you know, the police investigating, that was handled as more to protect that immigrant community, instead of telling the immigrant community, look, you're going to live here in this country, this is how you behave, you don't behave this way. And so it was allowed to swept under the rug and ignored, and those victims ignored. And so now that's producing a big pushback. And then you've had several, you know, a couple of other high profile incidents. And, you know, some make the argument that this is just being manipulated by the press in order to stir up uh, public sentiment against the immigrants. But you had this one, this one young British man was stabbed to death by a Sikh, and the Sikh, they then tried to claim that they were attacked by this kid who died, and then the police would, again, when they show up on scene, uh, the kid was saying, "Hey, I've been stabbed. and the police ignored him, put him in cuffs, and he bled out and died. If he'd been treated, he might have lived. Uh, and then up in Ireland, this one is I think he was Sudanese or from Senegal. Tried to decapitate one man. I had him down on the ground in the street. Finally, other Irish citizens came running up and got the guy off and gave him a pounding. So there is this great frustration among people about the immigrants and the failure of government to crack down on their misbehavior, looking the other way, allowing it. And it's similar to what we saw here in the States as well, that this, we go back 3 years ago, this flood of immigrants being allowed into the country without going through the normal process that any other person would have to do in order to enter a country and live there. So
Right.
so this is the pushback that is coming, and but Keir Starmer, um, it's well, and frankly, we see similar bizarre disconnects from reality. So here you have the mayor of Chicago, this Brandon Johnson, no relation to me, thank God. He's on a big push to about we got to stop the killing of transvestites. This is or transsexuals. This is a hate crime, etc. And yes, well, gee, how many have been killed? One, and that guy was killed by his boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever he was identifying as that day. So the reality is there's no hate crime directed at them. And yet, at the same time, Chicago, you got dozens of black kids. They're getting killed in gang warfare, and Latinos getting killed in gang warfare. And Johnson's doing nothing about that. And so that's where you get this disconnect that the government, instead of actually, ideally, it's supposed to protect society and protect people so you can go about your business without having to carry a firearm. But that's has been one of the reasons that like where I live, we're actually is very safe and secure. But part of that is people know a large portion of the population is armed. So, and in Florida, we got pretty liberal. They got laws about stand your ground and self defense that you could get in trouble in another state. But here, if someone is like if you're in a car, someone's been road raging you and they stop in front of you and they hop out of the car coming back at you, you could shoot them and it'd be okay, most likely, particularly if they're carrying any weapon in their hand. But my point out of this is you don't want to have society devolve to that level where you got to, the sort of the strongest survive. It's a Darwinian struggle. You'd like to just say, have some laws, and can't we just get along?
Yeah, and this refugee problem, it skyrocketed in 2011 after invasion of Libya, when Gaddafi, he was actually openly saying when he was bombed by Sarkozy with a blessing from United States, I guess, and from his other European partners, and Gaddafi told that I'm actually holding back all this wave of refugees that is coming to Europe. And the thing is that there was investigation and it was told that people who come to Europe, they're not actually fleeing from some kind of disaster. In fact, these people are prosperous in their countries. So they're not fleeing war. They're just seeing EU as a cow that they can milk from and so on. And people who really need help, they're located back in the countries where they live. I remember my former boss, his friend was working for, I don't remember which bank, but it was a big international bank. And he went to Uganda to visit his friend. And in Uganda, it was, I think, 2007 or something like that. Situation was as follows. The most well-paid job was a guard in the hotel. It was an armed guard, and they received $18 per month. It was the top, best, like dreaming salary. 95% of local population don't have passport. and 90% they simply dream of leaving Uganda someday, and they cannot do that because majority of them they don't have even a passport.
Right.
So country is in total disaster, and instead of solving that problem, the problem is deepened by the actions of European and in general of the West, because they want to maintain the level of life that elites got used to. Because people here are also starting to feel consequences of, so to speak, not very smart decisions made by the
When you
managers.
say, when you say here, where are you? You talking Norway?
Now I'm in Central Europe, but it also applies to Norway. It practically applies to all the Western Europe, I
Okay.
would say. So it's sad for me to see what Europe is becoming. And in this sense, Putin's speech that he held today, I translated already a part of it and it's published. And he said that in Europe, he sees the tide is turning. The politicians who promote this aggressive behavior towards Russia, their ratings are now declining. And at least I heard some hope in his words that a new wave of politicians will come. And I'm also started to think about US when you were discussing American internal like events. Is it possible that some kind of third party will emerge in the United States that will align maybe the uh, thinking people and the people who really wish US the best, like Tucker Carlson, for example, or Tulsi Gabbard. And I see, well, these people are very brave, in my opinion, because Tulsi, when she published this document, and Tucker Carlson, he is saying such thing. I really hope that they will do well, but maybe they could create some kind of political movement to oppose what Democratic and Republican Party have become.
Well, yeah, it has happened in history. And here in the United States, there was a time where there was no Republican Party, but the Republican Party emerged from another failed party, and again, like in the United Kingdom, they have historically been labor and conservative for more than 150 years, I guess. But right now, both parties are seen as being dysfunctional, not responsive to the needs of the people, and that's why the Reform Party is starting to pick up speed and could, in fact, become a competitor. So, yeah, that when the existing political institutions no longer serve the needs of the people, then inevitably something new arises out of it. So, third party movements in the United States have floundered in the past, but I think the growing frustration over the how corrupt both, like here in the United States, how corrupt both the Republicans and Democrats are, that just in the last couple of days, Tucker Carlson declared, I'm never voting Republican again. I'm not going to be a Republican, not going to be a Democrat. Marjorie Taylor Greene basically said the same thing. I know I'm in that camp. So there are a number of us out there that at some point it's going to come together and create a political force that maybe will have the courage to take on this establishment corruption. It's
Well,
just so
Larry, I think,
endemic.
see, the thing in that it seems to me to be one of the stumbling blocks, and I also want to focus this on Ukraine in a second, is that there are people that are totally upset, just like what you're saying, and it's legitimate. They see the established, it's left wing and right wing of the same rotten bird. But what you have is nobody's talking about the economic recovery that the United States will have. Well, let's put it this way: the meltdown of the fake economy, and then the rebuilding of a real economy that would need to happen, that would rally the population, because most people don't even know what it is that we need as a nation. You know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
again, going back to the economy, and of course, here we have the death of Alan Greenspan, somebody who really helped to build up that financial elite for years and years in the United States, taking down the U.S. economy. Most Americans don't have a concept of that. They're out of that. They're out of the loop of knowledge. So we have to educate them on that. Now, thinking about that from the standpoint of Ukraine, at a certain point, Ukraine is it's gonna go, right? It's gonna be done. Those people over there, they're gonna want blood. Hey, we were lied to. Like over in England, I think a lot of stuff is going on to distract, to make people bloodthirsty about Russia, because you have England itself on the verge of being taken down by the population.
Right.
But that's not necessarily productive, right? You want something that is productive, that is good, that replaces the financial establishment. So, what do you think about those things?
Yeah, no, it's one thing to run against, but again, you have to have something that is a positive out there that people can stand for. Um, with Ukraine, we're just watching the destruction of a civil of a society almost of a civilization. And yeah, at the heart of it, the greed that's involved. So the we kn- I got some new information about Zelensky's uncle has been making weekly trips to Abu Dhabi, Dubai, carrying bags of cash. So this money is being the USA that comes to Ukraine. They get the dollars. They then go to the airport, fly to United Arab Emirates, or also Latvia, Lithuania. They've done that too. And then the money's put into banks. Now, the way it's laundered in the United Arab Emirates, that money is then used to purchase uh, some condos or buildings that are being built. And this turns into a Ponzi scheme because these you have a chance to come in and invest in this. Oh, you're going to really get your money back, and so uh, they'll put their money into that as the to show. Oh yeah, this is a growing concern. Then actual foreign investors come in, put their money in, and these others that brought the stolen money from Ukraine, they get their money back out as if it's from a real estate investment, and then that money is wired to Israel, and then from Israel, some of those proceeds are wired to members of the U.S. Congress that we've talked about in the past. So I mean, and this is going on, and I mean, we're talking really hundreds of millions of dollars that have moved this way over time. So
Actually, yeah.
you go
It
ahead.
doesn't surprise me that the Baltics is involved, because when I quit banking system, Latvia had 28 banks with population of hardly 1.9 million people, 28 banks, and
Yeah.
half of them were privately, locally owned. They were mostly dealing with CIC countries when they were literally laundering money for Russians, for Ukrainians, for anyone who was coming from former Soviet space. And half of the banks, they were Western owned, and they were dealing mostly with other stuff which other banks were not allowed to engage in. And what I also noticed, it happened a while ago, but Norde and DNB banks, these are big, solid Scandinavian banks, they left Latvia, and now they established a blue-orange subsidiary. It is called like that, that is used for servicing needs of the Baltic states. So big banks, they don't even want to deal, as far as I understood, from reputational point of view, they don't want to deal with the Baltics anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's just when we talk about money laundering, you're talking about money that it comes from an illegal act, like if you've stolen it, if it's money that's been earned through prostitution, child trafficking, drug sales, illegal arms sales, etc. And then you got to come out and show that when you talk about washing it, the reason this money is put through these banks in the Emirates, that um, when you can go and say, well, this money came from the sale of this real estate property. Oh, okay. When in fact it didn't. It was just put into it as the sort of the foundation for the transaction, attracted other money. Then they can turn around and say, oh, this came from that real estate sale. And so it's clean.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is like that. So, okay, I guess it's time for us to wrap up. It's a pity
Yep,
that we
thank
had a
you.
shorter.
Good Lord,
Yeah,
that
but
went quick. We got started
yeah,
late, but that went
yeah,
quick.
It did. It
yeah,
did. Well, thank you very much, Larry. And I learned a
yeah.
number of things here on this call. I think we got our work cut out for us to get the American population in shape to, oh, and the Europeans, but I don't even know what to say about that
Yeah,
situation.
yeah,
So,
it's a mess. But we'll
Yes.
hopefully let's hope the peace that they're trying to get started. Let's hope it continues to next week. So then we'll have nothing to talk about, or we can talk
one
about.
day at a time, one day at a time.
You
There it
know,
is.
Ryan, one thing I just didn't want to occupy Larry anymore, but what I wanted to make one point. People in Russia, some of them will hate me, of course, for saying that, but I can say that because my relatives, they came from kulaks, so to speak, these wealthy peasants that were раскулачены. This is the term, that they were deprived of their property. And what happened in Russia in 1917? This revolution, this was revolution from below, because there was a need in change. And what happened in Russia in beginning of 2000s was revolution from above, when actually Putin came. So I sincerely wish our Europe and the US revolution from above. So at last some reasonable people come to power, and that will prevent bloody chaos that we all can fall into. Because I don't call for revolutions. I want normal, peaceful reforms that will, of course, they will be painful for some people, because we will have to. We, of course, not me, because I've been through fall of Soviet Union, and it's a little bit different for me. But for people who were living in the West, I guess it will be kind of painful experience. But we need to go through that, because this bitter pill, in the end, it will make good for all of us. This is
Yeah, I mean, I keep thinking about when I was in Russia in 1991. I was 16 years old. I saw what it looked like, and people here have no idea of. I mean, I didn't see everything, but what I saw was enough to tell me what it could be. Um, and I do agree with you. We need something that is peaceful reform. But I mean, look, we are we're a democratic representative form of government. We're a republic, and the government, you have to have a combination, right? You have to have somebody that represents a good policy, and this is where Trump is like it's a mixed bag. Some things he has an idea, but then you have these other people that want to sabotage that and focus him on this other endless war doctrine. So and he doesn't know. He's just an egomaniac, as most politicians are. So you need somebody that has a policy, and then you need a population who stops playing the game of Democrat versus Republican, left versus right, this side versus that side, and who says, no, we're going to fight for the policy. That's why it's important, I think, to not be distracted by the Ukrainian attacks. What you said about having these drones full of things that make big explosions and lots of black smoke for the media. The special military operation just needs to keep going, and people don't need to be distracted, because that's what's going to ultimately bring down NATO. That's what's going to force Europe to come to their senses, is just a very specific, ongoing fight like that.
Yeah, this
So
is
I
what
think you're
Putin
right.
was talking about today, and we have published that piece. I think it would be, we are doing some job for the Russian media as well.
Yeah,
Well, it's
doing
good.
what they're not doing. All right,
Yes.
well, Yelena,
Yeah.
so people need to go and see the
Yes.
East Calling X and Telegram site. That's
Yes.
what it means.
Yes.